Welcome to Manic Ramblings and Sober Thoughts, a podcast about men's mental health told through the eyes of a bipolar alcoholic in recovery. I'm Zachary Rose and I'll be your host. In a world where nearly 80% of suicides are men, millions are silently fighting battles nobody sees. Too many men are struggling with depression, trauma, addiction, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and loneliness completely alone. Many go undiagnosed for years because they were taught to stay quiet, suck it up, and keep moving no matter how bad things get. This podcast is for the men trying to survive their own minds, the ones drowning in racing thoughts, the ones self-medicating to quiet the chaos, the ones carrying trauma they never learned how to process, the fathers trying to break cycles, the husbands trying to become better men, the men who feel completely alone, even in a crowded room. This is not therapy. This is not polished, this is honesty. The manic thoughts, the sober reflections, the guilt, the anger, the addiction, the healing, the rebuilding, one conversation at a time. If you're struggling, you're not weak, and you're definitely not alone. Welcome to Manic Ramblings and Sober Thoughts. Welcome to the very first episode of Manic Ramblings and Sober Thoughts. I've gone back and forth of making this podcast more times than I can count. Part of me wanted to do it because I genuinely felt like men needed a place where they can be honest about what's going on in their heads without pretending they have it all fit together. But another part of me almost didn't do it at all because being this open is honestly terrifying. I think a lot of men understand that feeling. We grow up learning to hide things. We learn how to keep things moving no matter how exhausted, angry, depressed, anxious, addicted, or emotionally destroyed we actually are. We learn how to laugh things off instead of process them. We learn how to bury emotions until they eventually come out sideways as anger, addiction, isolation, impulsiveness, or self-destruction. And for a long time, that was me. I've spent most of my life trying to survive my own mind without really understanding what was happening inside of it. I've dealt with bipolar disorder, addiction, manic episodes, depression, emotional instability, anger, impulsive behavior, self-sabotage, and moments where I genuinely didn't know if I even liked who I was becoming anymore. But what's been hitting me the hardest lately is realizing that so much of what I thought was normal growing up was not normal at all. I think when people hear the word trauma, they picture something obvious. Constant screaming, physical violence, chaos all the time, but trauma can also look quiet. It can hide inside unpredictability, manipulation, emotional instability, secrecy, addiction, guilt, and growing up feeling like you constantly have to manage everyone else's emotions just to survive. When you grow up in survival mode long enough, your brain starts to treat in survival behaviors like personality traits. You become defensive before vulnerable, reactive before emotionally safe, suspicious before trusting, detached before honest. And the scary part is you don't even realize it's happening because it's all you've ever known. Lately, I've been uncovering memories from my childhood that I buried for years because I needed to survive them at that time. Things I minimized, things I laughed off, things I convinced myself weren't that bad, but looking at them through adult eyes now feels completely different. I realized I spent years normalizing chaos because chaos was familiar. And I think a lot of men do that. A lot of men are walking around carrying unresolved trauma they don't even recognize because nobody ever taught us how to process emotions in a healthy way. We were taught to suppress them, ignore them, drink them away, work through them, distract ourselves, push through them. But buried pain doesn't disappear. It leaks into everything: relationships, fatherhood, addiction, trust, self-worth, anger, fear, the way we react to people who genuinely love us. That realization has been brutal for me because I've had to face the fact that some of the things I hated growing up still found their way into me anyway. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but pain repeats itself when it's left untreated. Broken people break people. And honestly, that realization crushed me for a while because I think one of the hardest parts of healing is realizing you became someone you swore you would never become. Not entirely, not permanently, but enough to recognize it. Enough to know you hurt people while trying to survive yourself. Enough to realize your reactions weren't always coming from the present moment. Sometimes they were coming from old wounds that never healed. For me, a huge part of that showed up in relationships and trust. I spent so much of my life expecting betrayal, secrecy, abandonment, hidden truths, manipulation, because those were the environments I grew up around emotionally. So even when somebody genuinely loved me, part of my brain was always waiting for something bad to happen. And the hardest thing I've had to admit recently is that my wife never actually gave me reasons to fear her the way my brain convinced me to. A lot of my fear existed long before I even met her. That doesn't excuse my reactions. I still have to own those, but understanding where those fears came from changed the way I look at myself completely. I think men struggle with that a lot too. We know we're responsible for our actions, but nobody teaches us how much unresolved trauma shapes reactions, behaviors, addictions, insecurity, emotional regulation, and relationships. And because men don't talk about these things openly, a lot of us end up feeling broken instead of wounded. There's a difference. Broken sounds hopeless. Wounded means something happened to you and healing is possible. I'm trying to believe that healing is possible. Not perfect healing, not overnight transformation, not becoming some fake motivational speaker version of myself. I'm talking about real healing. Learning how to pause before reacting, learning how to communicate honestly, learning how to sit with emotions instead of numbing them, learning how to be emotionally safe, learning how to become the kind of husband and father my family deserves. That's honestly what this podcast is about. Not pretending I have life figured out, because I damn sure don't. Not acting like I'm cured, because I definitely am not. Not trying to sound smarter than everybody else, because there is no way I am smarter than everybody. Just honesty. The manic thoughts, the sober reflections, the uncomfortable truths, the rebuilding process. Because I genuinely think that there are millions of men silently struggling through mental illness completely alone right now. Men dealing with depression who still got to go to work every day pretending they're fine. Men drinking themselves numb at night because it's the only way they know how to quiet their minds. Men carrying childhood trauma they've never spoken out loud. Men terrified to ask for help because they think vulnerability makes them weak. Men one bad day away from completely falling apart while everyone around them thinks they are okay. And statistically, a lot of them never get help. That's the reality nobody likes to talk about. Men make up the overwhelming majority of suicides. Men are less likely to seek mental health treatment. Men are more likely to isolate, more likely to self-medicate, more likely to suffer silently until things become catastrophic. And honestly, I understand why. Because being emotionally honest as a man feels terrifying sometimes, especially if your entire life you learned survival instead of emotional safety. But I think silence is killing people. I think isolation is killing people. And I think pretending we're okay when we're drowning internally is destroying men quietly every single day. That's why I wanted to make this. Not because I think I have the answers, but because maybe hearing somebody else say the things you're afraid to admit makes you feel a little less alone. I know what helped me years ago. And maybe this podcast will grow into something bigger later. Maybe I'll bring guests on. Maybe other men will share their stories too. Maybe conversations happen here that people normally only have alone at 2 a.m. in their heads. I don't know yet. But I know I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of hiding behind humor every time something hurts. Tired of numbing emotions instead of facing them. Tired of acting emotionally bulletproof when I'm not. Tired of survival mode ruining my life. I want peace. Real peace, not distraction, not temporary highs, not dopamine, not addiction, not chaos, just peace. And I think peace starts with honesty, even ugly honesty, especially ugly honesty. Because the truth is, some days my mind still gets loud. Some days I still spiral. Some days I still feel guilt for the person I became during the worst moments. Some days I still feel anger over the things I can't change. Some days I still feel broken by the things that happened to me years ago. But for the first time in my life, I'm actually trying to understand myself instead of run from myself. And maybe that's where healing starts. Not perfection, not becoming emotionless, not never struggling again. Just awareness. Awareness of where the pain came from, awareness of the cycles, awareness of the damage, awareness that healing is necessary if I want my kids to grow up differently than I did. That's honestly one of the biggest motivations behind all of this, my kids. Because nothing scares me more than the idea of passing down pain I never dealt with. I don't want my children growing up feeling emotionally unsafe. I don't want them learning survival instead of stability. I don't want them carrying confusion, fear, addiction, anger, or emotional chaos into adulthood the way I did. I want this cycle to stop with me. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I genuinely mean it. I think generational trauma is real. I think addiction spreads through families. I think emotional instability spreads through families. I think silence spreads through families. But I also think healing can spread too. I think accountability can spread. I think honesty can spread. I think emotional safety can spread. I think becoming self-aware can change an entire family line moving forward. At least I hope so. Because honestly, I'm still figuring this out in real time. I'm not sitting here recording this as somebody who already conquered everything. I'm recording this as somebody still fighting, still learning, still healing, still rebuilding, still trying to become better than who I used to be. And maybe that's enough. Maybe growth isn't about becoming perfect. Maybe it's just about finally becoming honest, enough to change. So if you're listening to this and any part of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Seriously, you are not weak for struggling. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are not weak for needing help. You are not weak for being emotional. You are not weak for trying to heal. You are human. And maybe it's time more men started admitting that. Welcome to Manic Ramblings and Sober Thoughts. I hope you come back and listen more.